There was a time when childhood was not freedom, but responsibility. In the Middle Ages, children grew up without ever noticing when childhood ended. If you were listening at night, tell me where you are and what time it is. Welcome to Dreamy Old. Stories where we tell slow and gentle tales from history, stories that calm your mind and help you fall asleep in the quiet hours of evening. When the world outside seems to slow and soften, it can feel natural to drift backward in time, not with urgency, not with purpose, but with gentle curiosity. Imagine a landscape where the air is cooler, the roads are narrower, and the sounds of life are fewer and slower. Somewhere in that distant past, long before electric lights or moving screens, children are waking, walking, listening and growing, not in haste, but in rhythms shaped by fields, bells, and seasons. The Middle Ages do not arrive suddenly. They unfold like a long morning mist, spreading across centuries. Villages rest between forests and rivers, their roofs low and uneven, their walls made of wood, stone, or packed earth. Smoke rises lazily from hearths. The smell of damp soil and wood fire lingers in the air. In these villages, children live quietly among adults who are busy with work that never quite ends. Childhood exists, but it does not stand apart from life. It blends into it, almost unnoticed. A child in this world might wake before the sun is fully awake. The room is dim, the light faint and pale, slipping through small windows or cracks in wooden shutters. The bed is not soft in the way modern beds are soft. It is straw and cloth, sometimes shared with siblings, sometimes with warmth that feels crowded but familiar. The child does not think of comfort or discomfort in words. It is simply how mornings feel. Outside, the village stirs slowly. Chickens scratch the ground. A dog moves without hurry. Somewhere, a bell sounds, not loudly, not urgently, but steadily, marking time in a way that feels older than memory. Children listen to these sounds not as signals to perform, but as background to existence. Life happens around them, and they are part of it. In the Middle Ages, children are not separated from the adult world by many walls. There are no classrooms filled with identical desks, no screens glowing with distant voices. Instead, there are tools, animals, kitchens, workshops, fields. A child watches hands work in dough, weaving cloth, sharpening metal. Slowly, without formal instruction, the child begins to imitate what is seen. A small hand reaches for a small tool. A small voice repeats words overheard from adults. Learning happens quietly through presence rather than explanation. Time feels different here. Days stretch long, shaped by sunlight and shadow. Seasons move slowly, sometimes harshly, sometimes gently. Winter brings cold and silence. Summer brings warmth and noise. Children notice these changes not as lessons, but as moods of the world. They learn when to expect rain, when the ground will be hard, when the harvest will come. Their knowledge is not written down. It lives in memory, habit, and shared experience. Clothing is simple and practical. A child's tunic may be rough, patched many times, passed down from older siblings. Shoes may be scarce. Bare feet touch earth, stone, straw. The sensation is ordinary, not remarkable. Children grow accustomed to textures and temperatures. Their bodies adapt quietly, without complaint. Food arrives in steady but modest forms. Bread, porridge, vegetables, sometimes milk, sometimes meat when fortune allows. Children eat what is available, not what is chosen. The act of eating is not entertainment. It is part of survival, part of routine. Around the table, voices are low, conversations practical. Stories sometimes appear, but they do not dominate. The day, life, is not narrated. It is lived. Yet within this quietness, small moments of childhood still exist. A child may run briefly across a field, chasing nothing in particular. A laugh might escape unexpectedly. A simple game with stones or sticks might fill an afternoon. These moments are not recorded in chronicles. They vanish as quickly as they appear. But they are real as the heavy work in the serious faces of adults. Religion is present everywhere, like a soft echo. Churches stand at the center of villages, their bells marking hours that feel both earthly and eternal. Children grow up hearing prayers, seeing rituals, absorbing meanings without fully grasping them. They learn that life is larger than themselves, that there are forces beyond sight. These ideas settle slowly into their minds, like dust settling on furniture. Parents do not speak often of childhood as a special phase. To them, children are future workers, future spouses, future members of the community. Love exists, but it is not always expressed in words or gestures that modern people would recognize. A parent's care might appear as a warm cloak placed on small shoulders or a stern warning spoken with our softness. Affection is practical, woven into daily tasks. Danger is never far away. Illness, hunger, accidents, conflict. Children grow up aware, even if only vaguely, that life can change suddenly. Yet fear is not constant. It is simply part of the background, like weather. People learn to live with uncertainty without naming it as such. When evening comes, the village quiets again. The sky darkens slowly, not abruptly. Candles flicker. Shadows lengthen along walls. Children feel tired in their limbs, not from mental strain, but from movement and effort. They settle near the hearth or on simple beds. Stories may be told softly, not to impress, but to fill the silence. Sometimes the stories drift into half-remembered myths, sometimes into practical advice, sometimes into nothing at all. As a child closes their eyes in this medieval world, there is no sense of history, no awareness of belonging to an era there. Is only the warmth of the fire, the sound of breathing around them, the faint noise of animals outside, and the slow turning of time. Tomorrow will come much like today, and today is already fading, quietly, without announcement, and so childhood in the Middle Ages begins, not with grand events, but with ordinary mornings and ordinary evenings, with hands learning movements, with ears learning sounds, with hearts slowly adjusting to the rhythms of a world that feels permanent, steady and unhurried, as days pass in quiet repetition. Children in medieval villages begin to understand that the world is not built for speed. It is built for continuity. The same paths are walked again and again. The same fields are ploughed each year. The same stories are told by the same voices, in slightly different tones. Childhood unfolds within these repetitions, slowly shaping the way a child sees everything. A young child often stays close to home at first. The boundaries of their world are small. A doorway, a yard, a well, a corner of a field. Beyond that, forests appear deep and mysterious, not because they are dramatic, but because they are unfamiliar. Children learn where it is safe to walk, and where it is better not to wander. These lessons are not explained in long speeches. They are absorbed through observation, through quiet warnings, through the subtle reactions of adults. In many households, siblings are numerous. A child grows up surrounded by other small bodies and voices. Privacy is rare. Silence is rare too, though it arrives in different forms. Sometimes silence means snow falling outside. Sometimes it means exhaustion after a long day. Children learn to share space, food, warmth, and attention. They learn that belonging is not optional. It is necessary. As children grow older, their roles become clearer. A boy may begin to follow his father into the fields or the workshop. A girl may stay close to her mother, learning how to manage household tasks. These distinctions are not debated. They are simply accepted, like the rising and setting of the sun. Yet within these roles, each child experiences the world in their own quiet way. One may notice the rhythm of hammer on metal. Another may notice the way dough slowly changes beneath careful hands. There is little formal schooling for most children. Books are rare and expensive. Writing is a skill reserved for monasteries, courts, and a small circle of privileged people. For most children, knowledge is not something written on paper. It is something carried in gestures, habits, and spoken words. They learn how to measure grain without numbers, how to sense weather without instruments, how to understand moods. Without psychology, sometimes a traveling merchant passes through the village. Sometimes a pilgrim arrives, dusty and tired, speaking of distant cities and strange customs. Children listen quietly, their eyes wide but their questions few. These moments expand the world slightly, like a ripple on still water. Then the visitors leave, and the village returns to its familiar shape. Festivals mark rare changes in routine. A religious feast day might bring music, color, and laughter. Children experience these moments with a mix of excitement and confusion. They do not fully understand the meaning behind the rituals, but they feel the shift in atmosphere. Bells ring more often. People wear better clothes. Food tastes richer. For a short while, life feels lighter. Then the festival ends, and ordinary days return. Illness is a frequent companion in medieval life. Children see fevers rise and fall. They hear whispered prayers and worried conversations. Sometimes someone recovers. Sometimes someone does not. Death is not hidden from them. It exists openly, though rarely discussed in philosophical terms. Children learn early that life is fragile, but they do not dwell on it constantly. Fragility becomes part of the background, like wind or rain. Work slowly becomes more demanding as children approach adolescence. Tasks once performed playfully become responsibilities. Carrying water, tending animals, collecting firewood, helping with harvests. These activities are not framed as character building. They are simply necessary. Children feel fatigue in their muscles, but also a quiet sense of belonging. They are no longer only observers. They are participants. Even so, moments of stillness remain. A child may pause beside a stream, watching water move around stones. They may lie on grass and look at clouds, noticing shapes without naming them. Such moments are not celebrated. They are not scheduled. They happen between tasks, between instructions, between expectations. In these pauses, something like inner life begins to form. Though it has no words yet, language itself is simple and local. Children speak dialects shaped by region and tradition. Words carry practical meanings more than abstract ones. Concepts like progress or future are not common in daily speech. Time is felt more than discussed. Yesterday blends into today. Tomorrow feels similar to both. Authority is present but not theatrical. Lords own land. Priests interpret. Spiritual matters. Parents make decisions. Children rarely question these structures openly, not because they are forced into silence constantly, but because questioning feels unnecessary. The world seems stable enough to accept, yet stability is not perfection. Hunger can arrive unexpectedly. Wars can pass nearby. Taxes can increase. Rumors can spread. Children absorb these tensions without fully understanding them. They sense changes in adult voices, in the way conversations stop when they enter a room. Slowly, they learn that beneath the calm surface of daily life, there are currents they cannot control. As evening returns each day, children carry tiredness not only in their bodies, but also in their thoughts. The fire glows softly. Shadows move. Along walls, voices become quieter. Someone hums a tune without thinking. Outside, the world darkens in layers rather than in sudden darkness. In these moments, childhood does not feel dramatic or heroic. It feels ordinary, continuous, and quietly persistent. And so, without clear boundaries between learning and living, between play and work, between childhood and adulthood, children, in the Middle Ages, continue to grow. They do not rush toward the future. They drift toward it slowly, carried by routines, by seasons, by the gentle weight of tradition, barely aware that they are part of a long story that stretches far beyond their village, far beyond their lifetime, and far beyond anything they can imagine. Night settles gently over the village, not as an ending, but as another familiar layer placed over the day. Children feel the world becoming quieter, slower, softer. The fire crackles with a low, patient sound. Outside, the wind moves through trees without hurry. Somewhere, an animal shifts its weight and size. These sounds are not unusual. They are part of the fabric of existence. In the dim light, children begin to sense that life is not made of sharp beginnings and endings. It is made of gradual changes. A child who once watched from the doorway now stands beside adults. A child who once carried small bundles now lifts heavier loads. No ceremony announces these transitions. No clear line separates yesterday from today. Growing up happens like the slow widening of a path that was always there. Sometimes a child wonders about places beyond the village. The thought arrives quietly, without urgency. What lies beyond the forest? What exists beyond the hills? The questions are not spoken often. They remain soft and distant, like clouds that never quite reach. The ground. For most children, the village is not a limitation. It is the entire known universe, complete in itself. Seasons continue their steady turning. Spring brings new sounds and smells. Summer stretches long and warm. Autumn gathers crops and quiet reflection. Winter closes the world inward. Children feel these shifts not as events, but as moods. Their bodies and minds adjust without conscious effort. They learn patience without being told to be patient. They learn endurance without being taught the word. Occasionally, something unusual happens. A stranger stays longer than expected. A conflict arises between families. A sudden storm damages roofs or fields. Children watch these disturbances with wide eyes, sensing that the familiar world can change. Yet after each disruption, routines return. Bread is baked again. Animals are fed again. Bells ring again. Stability slowly reasserts itself, not through force, but through repetition. As years pass, children begin to resemble the adults they once observed. Their hands become steadier. Their voices deepen or soften. Their faces carry traces of both fatigue and calm. They inherit not only tasks, but ways of seeing. The world still feels large and mysterious in some corners, but it also feels predictable in others. This balance between the known and the unknown becomes the quiet foundation of their lives. And so, without grand declarations, without dramatic turning points, medieval childhood continues to move forward. It does not rush toward adulthood. It drifts toward it, guided by habit, shaped by necessity, softened by small moments of stillness. Somewhere in the half-light between day and night, between youth and maturity, children in the Middle Ages continue to grow, breathe, listen, and exist, unaware that their ordinary lives are part of a long and silent history that unfolds slowly, almost imperceptibly across centuries. Morning returns without ceremony, as it always does. The sky lightens slowly, as if it has all the time in the world. In medieval villages, children wake again to the same quiet rhythms, the same familiar shapes, the same sounds that have never felt new and never felt old. The day does not announce itself. It simply arrives. By now, childhood has begun to take on a different texture. The smallest years, filled mostly with watching and wondering, gradually give way to something steadier. Children are no longer only present, they are useful. Their hands are expected to move with purpose. Their eyes are expected to notice what needs to be done. No one explains this shift directly. It is understood in glances, in pauses, in the way adults begin to wait for a child's help without asking twice. In farm households, mornings begin with animals. Children learn to recognize sounds long before they understand words. The low murmur of cattle, the restless clucking of hens, the impatient stamping of hooves. These sounds are not background noise. They are signals woven into daily life. A child learns when to open a gate, when to carry feed, when to follow an older sibling into the cold air. Their movements become part of a routine older than they are. Hands grow accustomed to rough textures, wood, splinters, coarse rope, damp earth, warm fur. These sensations are not described. They are absorbed. Over time, children stop noticing them consciously. The world becomes something to touch without thinking. Pain appears sometimes, small and sharp, then fades into memory. Cuts, bruises, tired muscles. None of it is dramatic. It is simply how life feels. Inside the home, work continues quietly. Firewood must be arranged. water must be carried. Grain must be ground. Children move between tasks, sometimes slowly, sometimes clumsily. Adults correct them, not always gently, not always harshly, but with the practical tone of people who cannot afford inefficiency. Love exists here, but it is rarely separated from responsibility. In craft households, the rhythm is different but equally steady. A child might sit near a loom, listening to the repetitive sound of threads crossing, or near a forge, watching sparks rise and disappear, or beside a bench where leather is cut and shaped. At first, the child is only an observer. Then, gradually, they are allowed to assist in small ways, holding tools, sorting materials, repeating simple motions. Through repetition, the child begins to feel that skill is something that grows quietly, almost invisibly. There is little talk about dreams or ambitions. The future is not imagined in distant terms. It is understood as a continuation of the present. A farmer's child will likely become a farmer. A craftsman's child will likely learn the same trade. This expectation is not oppressive in the way modern minds might assume. It is simply stable. The path is already there, worn smooth by generations. Yet, even within stability, differences exist. Some children belong to wealthier households. Their clothes are slightly finer, their meals slightly richer. They may hear more stories, see more visitors, touch more books. Other children grow up with scarcity so familiar that it feels normal. They learn early how to measure hunger, how to share small portions, how to wait without complaint. Inequality is not discussed as a concept, it is experienced as atmosphere. For children of noble families, life takes on a different shape. Castles replace cottages, tutors replace fields, lessons replace chores, though not entirely. These children learn manners, languages, music, and the complex rituals of status. They are taught how to stand, how to speak, how to be seen. Yet even here, childhood is not leisurely in the modern sense. Expectations are heavy, though quieter than armor. The pressure to represent family honor settles on young shoulders without being named. In monasteries and convents, some children encounter another world entirely. Silence is deeper. Time is measured by prayers rather than sunlight alone. Learning becomes more formal, but still slow. Letters are traced carefully. Words are memorized patiently. Discipline is strict, yet often calm. Children here grow up surrounded by stone walls and echoed chants, their lives shaped by routines that feel timeless. Across all these worlds, one thing remains constant. Children are rarely alone. Community surrounds them. Families, neighbors, elders, animals, tools, traditions. Individuality exists, but it is not emphasized. A child understands themselves primarily as part of something larger. The village, the family, the household, the order of things. Belonging is not optional. It is as natural as breathing. Play exists, but it does not dominate. A child might roll a hoop along a road, carve a toy from wood, invent games with pebbles. All strings. Laughter appears briefly, then fades. Play is not scheduled or encouraged as a separate category. It emerges in gaps between tasks, like wildflowers growing between stones. As the day progresses, fatigue returns gradually, bodies slow down, Voices soften, shadows lengthen again. Children feel the weight of repetition, but also its comfort. There is reassurance in knowing what tomorrow will likely bring. No sudden transformations are expected. Life is not a series of dramatic milestones. It is a long sequence of similar days, each slightly different, each quietly shaping the child into someone older, steadier, and less surprised by the world. And in this steady unfolding, childhood continues its slow movement, not toward excitement, not toward revelation, but toward familiarity. Children in the Middle Ages do not grow up with urgency. They grow up with continuity, carried forward by routines that feel so ordinary that they hardly seem worth noticing, yet quietly define everything they are becoming. As the seasons continue their slow rotation, children begin to notice that time does not move in straight lines. It circles back on itself. The same fields change color, then change again. The same paths grow muddy, then dry, then muddy once more. In this quiet repetition, children learn something subtle. The world is not rushing anywhere. It is simply continuing. In many villages, the boundaries between home and work are almost invisible. A child steps outside and is already in the workplace. The yard is a workshop. The field is a classroom. The forest is a storehouse. Learning does not feel like learning. It feels like participation. Children rarely sit still for long. Their bodies are always slightly in motion, adjusting to tasks that never fully end. Conversation among adults often happens above a child's head, both literally and figuratively. Voices are low, words are practical. Discussions revolve around crops, weather, debts, neighbors, and rumors. Children listen without being invited into these conversations. They understand fragments, not wholes. Over time, fragments accumulate into a quiet understanding of how the world functions. Silence plays an important role in medieval childhood. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of continuity. There are long stretches of time when nothing remarkable happens. Children grow accustomed to these stretches. They learn to exist without constant stimulation. Their minds wander slowly, not restlessly. A child might stare at a wall, a fire, a patch of sky, and feel no need to fill the moment with words. Adults rarely ask children how they feel. Emotional language is limited. Feelings are expressed indirectly through behavior rather than explanation. A child learns when to be quiet by noticing the tone of a parent's voice. A child learns when to be cautious by sensing tension in the air. Emotional intelligence develops quietly, without formal vocabulary. Friendships among children are simple and situational. They arise from proximity rather than choice. Children work together, walk together, sometimes quarrel, sometimes reconcile. Conflicts are short-lived, rarely analyzed. Life moves forward too steadily to allow long grudges. Relationships are shaped less by personality and more by necessity. The physical environment leaves deep impressions. Cold mornings, heavy rain, bright sunlight, rough ground. Children grow up with bodies attuned to nature. They know the smell of approaching storms, the feel of changing seasons, the sound of distant thunder. This knowledge is not scientific, but intimate. Nature is not an abstract concept. It is a constant companion. For many children, hunger is a familiar presence. Not always severe, but persistent. Meals are modest, sometimes repetitive. A child learns to eat slowly, to appreciate warmth and fullness when it appears. Scarcity teaches patience without formal lessons. Abundance, when it arrives briefly during harvest or feast days, feels almost unreal. Illness continues to move quietly through communities. Children witness fevers, coughs, sudden weakness. They learn that health is not guaranteed. Remedies are simple: herbs, prayers, rest, hope. Sometimes they work, sometimes they do not. Children absorb these realities without dramatic reflection. The fragility of life becomes part of the atmosphere, like fog that never fully lifts. Education, where it exists, is uneven and fragile. In some towns, a child might learn to read a few letters from a priest or clerk. In others, no such opportunity appears. Knowledge is unevenly distributed, not by design, but by circumstance. Children do not compare their education with others. Far away, they have no reference point. What they know feels sufficient because it is all they know. As children approach adolescence, expectations subtly intensify. Voices become firmer. Tasks become heavier. Mistakes are less tolerated. Childhood begins to narrow, not through sudden commands, but through gradual shifts in tone. A child senses that they are being watched more closely, judged more quietly. Responsibility settles like a thin layer of dust on their daily movements. Yet even as responsibility grows, moments of softness remain. A parent may pause while working and glance at a child with a look that is neither strict nor indulgent, but quietly protective. An older sibling may share a piece of bread without explanation. An elder may tell a story that drifts slowly, without a clear ending. These moments are brief and understated, but they linger in memory longer than harsh words. At night, the village again becomes small and enclosed. Darkness wraps around buildings and fields. Children feel the world contract to the space around the hearth. The outside becomes distant, almost unreal. In this enclosed world, voices soften, movements slow, and thoughts wander gently. A child lying on straw or cloth may listen to sounds without trying to interpret them. The crackle of fire, the breathing of family members, the faint rustle of animals. These sounds form a kind of lullaby, not designed to soothe, yet soothing by repetition. The child does not think about history, destiny, or identity. They simply exist in the present moment, half awake, half dreaming. And so the process of growing up continues, not as a dramatic journey, but as a quiet accumulation of days. Each day adds a small layer to a child's understanding of the world. No single day feels important, yet together they shape a life that feels stable, predictable, and deeply rooted in routines that have existed long before the child was born and will continue long after they are gone. In this slow unfolding, medieval childhood remains neither tragic nor idyllic. It is ordinary, it is steady, it is shaped by repetition more than by revelation. And within that repetition, children continue to move gently forward, carried not by ambition or urgency, but by the calm, persistent rhythm of a world that rarely changes quickly and never explains itself in a hurry. Late evening arrives without clear edge. The light does not vanish suddenly. It thins, fades, and slowly withdraws from the world. Children feel this change not as an event, but as a gentle settling. The village becomes quieter, not empty, just quieter in a familiar way. Somewhere an Adult finishes the last task of the day. A bucket is placed beside a wall. A door is closed with a soft sound. A tool is set down where it will be found again tomorrow. Children watch these small gestures without thinking about them. They learn that life is made of endings that are not final and beginnings that are not dramatic. As children grow older, they begin to sense that their own presence has weight. When they were younger, they followed. Now they are expected to lead. Small moments. A younger sibling waits for them. An animal responds to their voice. An adult trusts them with a simple responsibility. These changes do not arrive with celebration. They arrive quietly, almost unnoticed. The idea of childhood itself remains unspoken. No one explains that these years are temporary or precious. Children do not think of themselves as being in a special phase of life. They think of themselves as living. The days are not counted. The years are not measured with anxiety. Time feels wide, slow, and repetitive, like a long road that curves gently out of sight. Sometimes, in rare moments of stillness, a child feels a vague sense of difference between yesterday and today. Their hands are stronger than before. Their voice sounds slightly unfamiliar to their own ears. Their thoughts wander farther than they used to. These realizations are fleeting. They do not linger long enough to become questions. Around them, adults move with a calm inevitability. They have already accepted the shape of their lives. Children sense this acceptance without being taught it. The future does not appear as an open field of possibilities. It appears as a continuation of what already exists. This knowledge is neither comforting nor frightening. It is simply there. Stories continue to pass through the village, carried by travelers, priests, soldiers, and merchants. Some stories are true, some exaggerated, some half-imagined. Children listen to them quietly. They do not separate fact from fiction with precision. They absorb impressions rather than details. Distant kingdoms, strange creatures, faraway seas. These ideas remain soft and distant, like images seen through fog. Occasionally, a child dreams of leaving the village. The thought appears briefly, then fades. Leaving feels as abstract as flying. The village is not only a place, it is the entire structure of life. To imagine another life requires language and concepts that children do not fully possess. So they remain where they are, not out of fear, but out of familiarity. As nights deepen, sleep arrives gradually. Children lie close to warmth, close to voices, close to the quiet pulse of communal life. Their minds drift through fragments of the day, the weight of a bucket, the sound of a bell, the smell of bread, the shape of a cloud. These fragments blend into dreams that are simple and unstructured. Tomorrow will come again. It will look almost exactly like today. Children will wake, move, help, observe, pause, and grow. No single moment will announce that they are becoming older. Yet the process will continue, steady and invisible. In this way, childhood in the Middle Ages does not feel like a journey towards something unknown. It feels like a slow immersion into something already present. Children do not hurry toward adulthood. They slide into it quietly, carried by routines, by expectations, by the gentle gravity of a world that values continuity over change. Morning arrives again with no announcement. The sky changes color so slowly that it is difficult to say when night truly ends and day truly begins. In the medieval world, children awaken not to alarms or schedules, but to subtle shifts in light, temperature, and sound. The air feels slightly different. The village breathes differently. Somewhere, a door opens. Somewhere else, a rooster calls without urgency. By now, childhood has settled into a familiar rhythm. Children know the shape of their days before they begin. They do not need to ask what comes next. Their bodies remember. Their hands remember. Their ears remember. Routine has become a kind of invisible guide, leading them through tasks that feel neither new nor burdensome, just necessary. As children grow older, their awareness of social roles deepens quietly. They begin to notice how adults speak differently to different people. A farmer speaks one way to a neighbor, another way. To a priest, another way to a Lord Steward. Children absorb these distinctions without analysis. They learn that tone matters, that silence can mean respect, that certain words are not for certain mouths. Hierarchy is not taught in formal lessons. It is experienced daily. A child sees how some houses are larger, how some tables have more. Food, how some people walk with confidence, while others lower their eyes. These observations do not become political thoughts. They become part of the mental landscape, like hills and valleys in the terrain of life. In marketplaces, when they exist, children witness small exchanges that reveal much about the world. Coins pass from hand to hand. Goods are weighed, measured, argued over. Voices rise briefly, then soften again. Children learn that value is something negotiated, not fixed. They see that scarcity and abundance are unevenly distributed, though they do not name it as injustice or fairness. It is simply how things appear. For many children, the church remains a central presence. Its walls are cool and thick. Its interior smells of wax and stone. Light filters through narrow windows, touching faces and objects in quiet ways. Children sit or stand during services, sometimes attentive, sometimes drifting. Words of sermons pass over them like slow waves. They do not grasp every meaning, but they feel the weight of ritual. Religious stories shape imagination without demanding. Analysis. Tales of saints, angels, sinners, and miracles settle into memory like half-remembered dreams. Children do not debate these stories. They accept them with the same calm acceptance they give to seasons and weather. The sacred and the ordinary exist side by side without clear separation. In noble households, childhood takes on a slightly different rhythm. Young boys may begin training in riding, archery, or etiquette. Young girls may learn music, embroidery, or courtly manners. These children move through spaces filled with tapestries, stone corridors, and formal gestures. Yet even here, childhood is not carefree. Expectations press quietly, shaping posture and speech. Mistakes are corrected with calm firmness rather than loud emotion. In poorer households, the rhythm is simpler but heavier. Children carry more weight, walk longer distances, endure harsher conditions. Yet they also experience moments of closeness and warmth that do not depend on wealth. Sitting beside a parent near a fire, sharing bread with siblings, listening to an elder's slow voice. These moments feel solid, almost timeless. As children approach the edge of adolescence, their sense of self begins to shift subtly. They notice their bodies changing, their strength increasing, their endurance expanding. They feel emotions more intensely, though they lack language to describe them. Pride appears quietly when a task is completed well. Shame appears when a mistake is seen. These feelings are not discussed openly. They remain private, half understood. Community continues to shape identity more strongly than individuality. A child is known as someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's helper. Names matter, but relationships matter more. Reputation forms slowly, built from small actions repeated over time. Children learn that being reliable is more valuable than being remarkable. Sometimes, in rare moments, a child encounters something truly unfamiliar. A foreign traveler with strange clothing. A weapon unlike any seen before. A song in an unknown language. These moments create brief ripples in the mind. The world seems larger than usual. Yet soon the unfamiliar disappears, and the mind returns to the known landscape of fields, houses, and familiar voices. Evenings continue to arrive gently. The pace of movement slows. Tools are cleaned and stored. Animals are settled. Children feel fatigue spreading through their limbs. Not unpleasant, just heavy. Voices around the hearth become quieter. Words stretch out, then pause, then stretch again. Silence is not awkward. It is expected. In these quiet hours, children sometimes sense that their lives are not entirely their own. Their paths seem prepared in advance. Yet this realization does not feel oppressive in the modern sense. It feels natural, like gravity. The idea of choosing a radically different life is distant, almost unimaginable, and so childhood in the Middle Ages continues its slow unfolding. Each day adds small layers of understanding, habit, and expectation. No dramatic revelations occur. No sudden transformations announce themselves. Instead, growing up feels like the gradual deepening of a familiar sound, like a melody played, so slowly that its changes are barely noticeable. Children move through this world with quiet endurance. They do not hurry. They do not resist strongly. They simply exist within the rhythms given to them, learning through repetition, absorbing through observation, and slowly becoming part of the same steady pattern that has shaped countless lives before them, and will continue shaping lives long after their own voices have faded into the gentle background of history. As days follow days, children begin to sense that life is not built from sudden changes, but from countless small adjustments. Each morning feels similar to the last, yet never identical. The light falls differently on walls. The air carries slightly altered scents. The voices around them shift in tone, sometimes warm, sometimes tired, sometimes distant. In this slow environment, children learn to read subtle signs. A raised eyebrow, a pause before speaking, the way someone sets down a cup. These details become a quiet language. Without being taught, children understand when to speak and when to remain silent. They learn when to move quickly and when to slow their steps. Awareness grows not through instruction, but through exposure. The boundaries between generations are less defined than in modern times. Children spend much of their lives beside adults. They hear adult conversations, witness adult worries, and observe adult compromises. There is little effort to shield them from reality. Instead, reality surrounds them like air. Over time, Children begin to internalize the idea that life is not something separate from hardship or responsibility. It is a blend of both. In village, the pace of change is slow enough that memory and tradition feel almost interchangeable. Elders remember how things were done decades ago, and children see that many of those ways still persist. The past is not distant. It is present in gestures, in tools, in stories repeated so often that they feel less like stories and more like facts of nature. Sometimes, elders speak of times when things were different. A year of famine, a season of war, a lord who was cruel or unusually kind. Children listen without dramatic reaction. These stories do not feel like warnings or lessons. They feel like weather reports from another time. The idea that life could change drastically exists, but it does not dominate thought. For many children, the concept of education remains abstract. They learn skills because they must, not because learning is celebrated. A child learns to tie knots because animals need to be led. They learn to count loosely because goods must be exchanged. They learn to judge distance because fields must be crossed. Knowledge is functional, not theoretical. Curiosity exists, but it is rarely indulged. Beyond what is useful, yet curiosity does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter. A child may wonder why stars move slowly across the sky. They may wonder why some people travel while others never leave. They may wonder why prayers are spoken in certain ways. These questions often remain unanswered, not because they are forbidden, but because no one feels compelled to answer them. Fully as children grow older, they begin to feel the weight of expectation more clearly. Their mistakes carry greater consequences. Their successes are noticed more deliberately. Adults begin to rely on them in subtle ways. A child may be trusted to handle money, to negotiate small exchanges, to supervise younger siblings. Trust is given cautiously, but once given, it becomes part of the child's identity. Gender roles become more defined. Boys and girls are guided toward different tasks, different behaviors, different futures. These divisions are rarely explained. They are enacted daily. Children absorb them without protest, not because they lack imagination, but because alternatives are difficult to envision. In noble households, children experience a world filled with ceremony. Bowing, formal greetings, structured lessons. Here, childhood is shaped by performance as much as by labor. Children learn to present themselves carefully. Their gestures are refined, their words chosen with care. Yet beneath the formality, their emotional experiences are not entirely different from those of village children. They feel loneliness, pride, confusion, and quiet hope, even if they do not articulate these feelings. In monasteries, children encounter discipline of another kind. Time is marked by bells and prayers. Silence is cultivated deliberately. Children learn to sit still, to listen inwardly, to repeat words that feel older than memory. For some, this environment feels suffocating. For others, it feels strangely comforting. The predictability of ritual offers a different kind of security across all social layers. One thing remains consistent. Childhood is not idealized. Adults do not romanticize youth. They do not preserve it deliberately. Instead, they guide children toward usefulness and stability. Growing up is not framed as a loss or a tragedy. It is framed as inevitability. Children sense this inevitability in small ways. When an adult praises a task done well, it is not praise for creativity, but for reliability. When an adult criticizes, it is not for imagination, but for inefficiency. Slowly, children learn what qualities matter most in their world: endurance, obedience, competence, and quiet resilience. Still, moments of softness appear unexpectedly. A parent might tell a story that wanders without purpose. An older neighbor might carve a small toy for a child without being asked. A stranger might smile briefly while passing through the village. These moments do not transform life, but they punctuate it gently, like pauses in a long sentence. As evenings return once more, children feel the familiar slowing of time. The world does not demand urgency. It allows fatigue. It allows silence. Sitting near the hearth, children listen to conversations that drift and fade. Words become less important than presence. The simple fact of being together becomes enough. In these quiet hours, children begin to sense that their lives are woven into something larger than themselves. They do not articulate this thought clearly. It appears as a feeling rather than an idea. They belong to a pattern that existed before them and will continue after them. This realization does not inspire rebellion or despair. It inspires acceptance. And so childhood in the Middle Ages continues. Not as a dramatic journey toward individuality, but as a gradual merging with tradition. Each day shapes the child slightly more into the form expected by their world. The process is slow, almost invisible, yet it is constant. Children move through their days with quiet persistence. They learn not through lectures, but through living. They grow not through ambition, but through repetition. And within the steady rhythm of medieval life, they continue to drift forward, carried gently by routines that feel ordinary, inevitable, and strangely reassuring. Like a familiar melody played so softly that it almost disappears into silence. Night deepens slowly, without sharp edges. The village does not fall asleep all at once. It softens. Sounds grow fewer, but they do not disappear entirely. Somewhere, a piece of wood shifts in the fire. Somewhere else, an animal moves in its stall. Children lie still, not always asleep, listening to the world that continues quietly around them. In these hours, thoughts drift without direction. A child remembers the feel of cold water on hands in the morning, the sound of a bell at midday, the brief laughter of another child in the afternoon. None of these moments feel important on their own, yet together they form the texture of a life. As years pass, almost unnoticed, children begin to understand that growing up is not something that happens suddenly. It happens in small, almost invisible increments. One day, a tool feels lighter than it used to. Another day, a path seems shorter. Another day, an adult asks for help in a tone that implies trust rather than instruction. These moments accumulate quietly. The medieval world does not encourage children to look inward too deeply. Reflection is not discouraged, but it is not cultivated either. Life leaves little room for prolonged introspection. Still, in quiet moments, children sometimes feel a vague sense of distance between who they were and who they are becoming. The feeling is soft and fleeting, like a shadow that passes across a wall. Adults rarely comment on these changes. They notice them, but they do not name them. To them, growth is expected. It requires no announcement. Children absorb this attitude. They learn not to mark their own transformations. They simply move forward. The village itself changes slowly, almost imperceptibly. A roof is repaired, a fence is rebuilt, a new family arrives, another family disappears. Children witness these shifts without ceremony. They learn that permanence is relative, that stability exists alongside gradual change. Sometimes, a child notices that certain elders are no longer present. Their voices are missing from familiar places. Their chairs remain empty. The absence is felt more than explained. Death is not hidden, but it is not dramatized either. Children learn to accept loss with quiet resignation, not because they are indifferent, but because life offers few alternatives. As adolescence approaches, responsibilities deepen further. Children are trusted with more complex tasks. They are expected to anticipate needs rather than wait for instructions. Their mistakes are corrected more firmly. Their successes are acknowledged more subtly. They begin to sense that childhood is narrowing, though no one tells them so. Yet even as responsibilities increase, the world does not become louder. It remains steady, predictable, and slow. The pace of life does not accelerate simply because a child is growing older. Instead, the child adapts to the same rhythm that has always existed. In moments of rest, children sometimes sit quietly and watch the world without participating in it. They observe adults working, animals moving, clouds drifting. These moments feel strangely complete, as if nothing more is required. The child does not feel pressure to change the scene. They accept it as it is. The concept of personal destiny does not dominate their thoughts. Life feels less like a path chosen and more like a path inherited. This inheritance is not experienced as a burden or a gift. It is experienced as reality, as nights continue to return. Children fall asleep with bodies tired but minds calm. Dreams come and go without clear structure. Some dreams reflect daily life. Others wander into strange and impossible images. Yet even dreams do not disrupt the underlying sense of continuity. Tomorrow will come again. It will bring familiar tasks, familiar sounds, familiar expectations. Children will rise, move, work, observe, pause, and slowly transform, just as they did yesterday and the day before. Morning unfolds once more with quiet certainty. The light returns as it always does, touching roofs, fields, and narrow paths with a pale, patient glow. Children wake without surprise. They do not expect novelty from the day. They expect continuity. By this stage of life, many children have grown, accustomed to the weight of routine. Their movements are no longer hesitant. They step into tasks with a familiarity that feels almost automatic. Hands reach for tools without conscious thought. Feet follow paths worn smooth by years of walking. The world feels predictable, not because it is simple, but because it rarely changes its rhythm. In the medieval village, sound carries meaning. The bell that rings from the church is not merely noise. It marks hours, prayers, gatherings, and absences. Children learn to interpret these sounds long before they understand their significance in words. The bell becomes part of their inner clock, shaping how they feel time rather than how they measure it around them. Adults move with quiet purpose. They rarely explain their actions. Children observe instead of questioning. A father inspects. the sky before entering the field. A mother adjusts a pot over the fire without speaking. An elder pauses before crossing a threshold, as if listening to something unseen. These gestures become lessons without language. As children grow, they begin to sense the invisible rules that govern social life. They learn when to bow their heads, when to greet strangers, when to avoid certain conversations. These rules are rarely written or spoken aloud. They exist in glances, silences, and tones of voice. Children learn them slowly, sometimes through mistakes that are corrected without much explanation. In times of communal work, such as harvest or construction, children witness the collective nature of survival. Villagers gather in fields, their movements coordinated by shared understanding rather than formal commands. Children join in where they can, their contributions small but meaningful. In these moments, they learn that individual effort matters less than collective rhythm. The concept of fairness is not articulated in abstract terms. Children observe that some people receive more than others, that some voices carry more weight, that some mistakes are forgiven while others are not. They do not analyze these patterns, they adapt to them. Adaptation becomes a quiet form of wisdom. As children approach the later years of childhood, their sense of responsibility deepens further. They begin to anticipate needs before they are spoken. A bucket is filled before someone asks. An animal is guided before it strays too far. These anticipations are rarely praised. They are simply expected. Children learn that competence is valued more than creativity. Yet even within this framework, individuality does not vanish entirely. Each child carries a slightly different way of seeing the world. One child notices sounds more than sights. Another notices patterns in weather. Another feels drawn to stories, even when stories are rare. These differences are subtle, rarely celebrated, but quietly persistent. In noble households, children of status begin to feel the growing weight of expectation more clearly. They learn that their actions represent not only themselves, but their lineage. Lessons become more formal. Movements become more controlled. Words become more carefully chosen. Childhood becomes a rehearsal for roles that feel inevitable. In contrast, children of laboring families experience expectation in physical terms. Their bodies are needed. Their endurance is tested. Their reliability is measured by how smoothly daily life continues. Praise is rare, but absence of criticism becomes its own form of approval. Across social boundaries, one shared experience remains: uncertainty. Crops may fail. Weather may change suddenly. Conflict may approach from distant regions. Children sense these uncertainties through adult behavior rather than direct explanation. Voices become quieter. Movements become sharper. Conversations stop abruptly when children enter a room. Over time, children learn to read these signs with precision, despite uncertainty. Life continues with remarkable steadiness. Bread is baked. Animals are fed. Fires are lit. Children learn that survival depends not on dramatic gestures, but on persistence. This lesson is not spoken aloud. It is absorbed through daily repetition. Moments of leisure remain rare but not non-existent. Sometimes children gather near a stream, letting water run over their hands. Sometimes they sit on a hillside, watching clouds drift slowly across the sky. These moments do not feel extraordinary. They feel like brief pauses in a long sequence of duties. Language continues to shape thought in quiet ways. Words are practical, tied closely to action. Abstract concepts remain distant. Children think in images, gestures, and experiences more than in theories. Their understanding of the world is concrete, grounded in what they can touch and see. As evening approaches, fatigue returns like a familiar companion, but is slowed down. Voices soften. The world contracts toward the hearth once more. Children feel the days settle into memory even before it fully ends. In these quiet hours, they sometimes sense that their lives are part of something larger than the village, larger than their own families. They do not articulate this feeling clearly. It appears as a faint awareness, like a distant sound that cannot be located. Growing up continues, not as a dramatic transformation, but as a gradual deepening of familiarity. Children do not step suddenly into adulthood. They slide toward it quietly, shaped by routines that rarely change and expectations that are rarely questioned. And so, within the steady rhythm of medieval life, childhood moves forward once more. Carried by repetition, softened by habit, and held together by a world that rarely hurries, rarely explains, and rarely notices the slow, almost invisible process of becoming. As days continue to unfold in their familiar sequence, children begin to feel that the world is held together by patterns that rarely break. Morning follows night. Work follows rest. Silence follows speech. These patterns do not feel restrictive. They feel reliable, like the steady pulse of something alive. In the medieval village, memory is not stored in books for most people. It is stored in people. Elders remember where paths once led, how floods behaved, how winters felt decades ago. Children listen to these recollections not as history lessons, but as extensions of the present. The past does not feel distant. It feels layered beneath the present, quietly supporting it. When adults speak of earlier times, they rarely dramatize them. Their voices are calm, sometimes weary, sometimes faintly amused. Children learn that events which might seem extraordinary from a distance are experienced as ordinary when they happen slowly enough. A year of poor harvest becomes another year remembered with a particular tone. A conflict becomes a story told. Without theatrical emotion, life absorbs everything into routine. As children grow, their bodies adapt to the physical demands placed upon them. Movements become efficient. Gestures become economical. They learn how to carry weight without strain, how to walk long distances without complaint, how to endure discomfort without drawing attention to it. These abilities are not celebrated. They are expected, and therefore unnoticed. In moments of quiet observation, children notice how adults carry themselves. They see fatigue in shoulders, patience in hands, restraint in voices. They also notice rare moments when adults pause, looking at nothing in particular, as if briefly stepping outside. The rhythm of daily life. Children sense that these pauses mean something, though they cannot name what. The boundaries between public and private life remain thin. Homes are small. Villages are close-knit. Children grow up knowing that their actions are visible, their words overheard, their reputation slowly forming in the collective memory of neighbors. Privacy is limited, but belonging is strong. A child learns that identity is not constructed alone. it is shaped by how others remember them. In marketplaces and communal gatherings, children observe subtle negotiations of status and respect. They watch how people greet one another, how they stand closer or farther apart, how they choose their words carefully or carelessly. These observations become lessons in social navigation. Children learn that survival is not only physical, it is relational. For some children, apprenticeship begins during these years. A boy may be sent to learn a craft under a master. A girl may be trained intensively in domestic or artisanal skills. Apprenticeship is not romanticized. It is practical. The child leaves home or spends long hours away from it, entering a new rhythm governed by another adult's expectations. At first, this feels strange. Then it becomes normal. In noble settings, children experience a parallel form of apprenticeship. They learn courtly behavior, diplomacy, etiquette. They are taught to control their expressions, to anticipate reactions, to maintain composure. Their training is less physical, but no less demanding. Mistakes are corrected quietly, sometimes coldly. Success is acknowledged with restraint. Across all settings, children begin to realize that approval is conditional. It is earned through reliability rather than originality. A child who follows instructions smoothly becomes valued. A child who disrupts routines becomes problematic. Slowly, children learn to align themselves with expectations, not because they consciously choose to, but because deviation feels uncomfortable. Yet beneath conformity, subtle individuality persists. A child may hum a tune while working. Another may prefer solitude to company. Another may develop an unusual sensitivity to sounds or moods. These traits are rarely encouraged or discouraged. Explicitly, they simply exist, small variations within a larger pattern. Religious life continues to shape perception. Children attend services, observe rituals, memorize prayers. Over time, these practices become part of their internal landscape. Sacred language blends with everyday speech. Moral ideas blend with practical concerns. The divine is not distant. It is woven into ordinary routines. Fear also exists, though. It is rarely expressed openly. Fear of hunger, fear of illness, fear of punishment, fear of the unknown. Children learn to manage fear not through discussion, but through endurance. They discover that fear often passes, just like storms. This realization becomes a quiet source of resilience. As adolescence approaches more closely, children begin to notice changes in how others look at them. Adults speak to them differently. Younger children imitate them. Responsibilities expand. Expectations harden slightly. Childhood begins to feel less open, less forgiving. Yet it does not end abruptly. It narrows gradually, like a path that slowly becomes more defined. In moments of solitude, children sometimes experience a faint sense of longing for something undefined. Not necessarily for escape, but for difference. The feeling is subtle and fleeting. It does not become rebellion. It dissolves into routine, absorbed by the weight of daily necessity. Evenings continue to provide the most noticeable shift in atmosphere. As light fades, the village seems to draw inward. Conversations slow, movements soften. Children feel the day settling into memory while tomorrow remains vague and distant. Near the hearth, stories are told again, sometimes repeated word for word. sometimes altered slightly by mood or forgetfulness. Children listen without demanding novelty. Familiar stories feel comforting. Predictability feels safe. As sleep approaches, children sense that their lives are not dramatic narratives. They are sequences of small actions, small observations, small adjustments. Growing up does not feel like transformation. It feels like accumulation. And so, within the quiet persistence of medieval life, children continue to move forward. They learn through proximity rather than instruction, through repetition rather than revelation. Their identities are shaped slowly, gently, and almost invisibly by the rhythms of a world that values continuity above all else. In this slow and steady rhythm, childhood remains neither extraordinary nor insignificant. It is simply life unfolding, one quiet day after another, carried forward by habits so familiar that they hardly seem to exist, yet quietly determining everything that children become. Night settles once again with the same quiet certainty that has followed the village for generations. The air cools gradually. Shadows deepen along walls and fences. Children feel the world slowing around them, as if time itself is stretching, becoming softer, less demanding. By now, many children are no longer surprised by the rhythm of their days. Surprise belongs to earlier years. Familiarity has replaced it. They know when the bell will ring. They know how the air will feel before rain. They know which footsteps belong to which person, even before seeing them. The world has become readable, not through books, but through long attention. In the glow of the hearth, faces appear calmer than they did in daylight. Adults seem less hurried here, their movements slower, their voices quieter. Children observe these changes without comment. They learn that people have different rhythms in different moments. Work has one tempo, rest has another. Silence has its own language. Sometimes, a child notices that adults seem older than before. Lines on faces deepen. Movements stiffen slightly. Voices lose some strength. These observations are not alarming. They feel natural, like leaves turning color in autumn. Children do not yet connect these changes to their own future. They simply register them as part of the world's texture. The village itself feels ancient in subtle ways. Stones in walls appear worn smooth by countless hands. Paths curve gently, shaped by feet that walked there long before the current generation was born. Children sense that they are stepping into footprints left by others, though they rarely think about it directly. In quiet moments, children sometimes wonder how long these patterns have existed. They do not form precise questions. Instead, they feel a vague impression that life has always been like this and will always be like this. The idea of radical change does not dominate their imagination. Stability feels more real than possibility. As responsibilities continue to deepen, children become more aware of their own usefulness. They notice that the household depends on their presence. When they are absent, tasks become harder. When they are efficient, life flows more smoothly. This awareness brings neither pride nor anxiety in explicit form. It simply settles into their sense of self. Community expectations continue to shape behavior. A child learns what kinds of actions bring quiet approval and what kinds bring subtle disapproval. Praise is rare, but so is dramatic punishment. Most correction happens through tone, silence, or small gestures. Children become skilled at reading these signals, adjusting themselves accordingly. Friendships among children evolve as well. Younger companions begin to look up to them. Peers begin to compete quietly. Older youths become slightly distant, moving into responsibilities that feel just out of reach. Children sense that they are approaching a threshold, though they cannot see it clearly. Occasionally, a child experiences a brief sense of separation from their surroundings. They stand still, while others move. They listen while others speak. For a moment, they feel like an observer rather than a participant. These moments are rare and fleeting. They do not lead to philosophical reflection. They dissolve into routine as soon as the next task begins. Religion continues to provide a quiet framework for meaning. Children repeat prayers almost automatically. Sacred words become familiar sounds. The presence of the divine feels neither overwhelming nor abstract. It is simply part of the environment, like stone walls or open fields. Fear and comfort coexist in subtle balance. Children know that life can be harsh, yet they also know that routines persist. When storms come, they pass. When illness strikes, it sometimes retreats. When conflict arises, it eventually fades into memory. This rhythm teaches children a form of quiet resilience. As nights deepen, fatigue becomes gentle rather than heavy. Children feel their bodies relaxing, their thoughts loosening. They lie down not with urgency, but with acceptance. Sleep arrives. Slowly, as if it too respects the unhurried pace of the medieval world. In the half-light between waking and dreaming, memories drift through their minds. The sound of a bell, the smell of bread, the weight of a tool, the expression on a parent's face. Nor of these images demand attention. They simply appear, then fade. Tomorrow will arrive again. It will not bring dramatic change. It will bring familiar tasks, familiar voices, familiar expectations. Children will rise, move, help, observe, pause, and continue their gradual transformation. Morning arrives once again without drama. The sky lightens slowly, as if it is remembering how to be bright. The village wakes in fragments rather than in unison. A door opens. A footstep sounds on packed earth. Smoke rises in thin, hesitant lines. Children open their eyes and feel the familiar weight of another day waiting quietly for them. By now, childhood has taken on a steadier shape. The early years of wandering and watching feel distant, though no one has marked the distance. Children have learned the grammar of daily life. They know which tasks belong to which hours. They know which voices carry authority and which carry kindness. They know when to move quickly and when to linger without consequence. In many households, children are no longer treated as merely small. They are treated as necessary. Their presence is woven into the functioning of the home. A child is expected to notice when water is low, when firewood is needed, when animals grow restless. These expectations are rarely stated aloud. They exist in the quiet assumption that a child has been watching long enough to understand. Work feels less like interruption and more like continuity. Children move from one task to another with minimal hesitation. Their bodies have learnt the rhythm of lifting, carrying, walking, waiting. Fatigue comes, but it is familiar. It does not feel like failure. It feels like proof of participation. In the fields, Children walk beside adults who rarely explain what they are doing. The soil is turned, seeds are placed, weeds are pulled. Children learn through proximity rather than instruction. They watch how hands move, how feet shift, how eyes scan the sky. Slowly, without formal teaching, they begin to replicate these movements. Skill grows not through ambition, but through repetition. In workshops, a similar quiet apprenticeship unfolds. A child watches. A craftsman shape wood, metal, leather, or cloth. At first, the child is given small tasks that seem insignificant. Sorting materials, holding tools, cleaning surfaces. Over time, these tasks become more complex. The child begins to feel the satisfaction of precision, though no one calls it by that name. Within families, emotional life continues to flow quietly beneath practical routines. Parents rarely express affection in overt ways, yet care is present. In small gestures, a cloak placed on a child's shoulders, a piece of bread saved for later, a brief touch on the head. These gestures are not discussed. They are felt and remembered. Children learn early that words are not the primary language of care. Actions are, presence is, silence is. They learn to recognize the difference between indifference and restraint, though they may not have words. For either, as children grow older, they begin to sense the limits of their world more clearly. The village remains the center of existence. Beyond it lie forests, hills, rivers, and roads leading to unknown places. Children hear stories of distant towns and distant wars, but these places feel more imagined than real. The idea of leaving. The village appears occasionally, then fades like a thought not worth pursuing. Social boundaries become more visible. Children notice that some people command respect more easily than others. A priest's words carry weight. A lord's representative is treated with caution. Wealthier families occupy larger spaces, eat differently, speak differently. These distinctions are rarely explained, but they are carefully observed. Children learn not to challenge these boundaries openly. Instead, they learn to navigate them quietly. They understand when to lower their gaze, when to speak softly, when to remain invisible. This understanding is not taught as obedience. It is learned as survival. Yet within these boundaries, small freedoms exist. A child may linger by a stream longer than necessary. They may hum a tune while working. They may invent a quiet game with pebbles or shadows. These moments are brief, often unnoticed by adults, but deeply felt by the child. They offer a sense of interior space. Even within a tightly structured world, religious life continues to shape perception in subtle ways. Children attend services, repeat prayers, observe rituals. Over time, these practices become less mysterious and more habitual. Sacred words blend into ordinary speech. The divine becomes less dramatic and more ambient, like a presence that is always there but rarely questioned. Fear remains present but muted. Children know that illness can strike suddenly, that harvests can fail, that conflict can arrive without warning. They sense these possibilities in adult behavior rather than in explicit warnings. Voices become tense, movements become hurried, conversations end abruptly. Children absorb these signals without panic. Uncertainty becomes another part of routine. As adolescence approaches more closely, children begin to feel a subtle shift in how they are seen. Adults speak to them with slightly less indulgence. Younger children look to them for guidance. Their own mistakes feel more consequential. Childhood does not end abruptly. It thins gradually, like fog lifting slowly from a field. In the late afternoon, light begins to soften. Shadows stretch across paths and walls. Children feel the day drawing toward its quiet conclusion. Their bodies carry the weight of tasks completed. Their minds carry fragments of conversations, sounds, and images. Evenings remain the most reflective time, though reflection is not deliberate. Sitting near the hearth, children listen to voices that drift and fade. Stories are told again, sometimes with minor variations, sometimes exactly the same. Familiarity feels comforting. Novelty feels unnecessary. In these moments, children do not think of themselves as historical figures or representatives of an era. They think of themselves as participants in a steady flow of days. Growing up does not feel like transformation. It feels like gradual adjustment to responsibilities that seem to have always existed, and so Part 5 begins its slow unfolding. Childhood continues not as a dramatic journey, but as a quiet alignment with the rhythms of medieval life. Children move forward without hurry, shaped by repetition, guided by expectation, softened by small moments of warmth. Within this unhurried world, they continue to grow, not toward excitement or escape, but toward familiarity. Time moves gently, and children move with it, step by step, scarcely noticing that the space between who they were and who they are becoming is slowly, steadily widening. The days continue to pass in a way that feels both steady and almost invisible. Children rarely mark time with numbers. Instead, they feel it through changes in weather, through the shifting weight of tasks, through the gradual alteration of voices and bodies around them. Time is not counted. It is sensed in the village. Children begin to recognize that every person carries a role shaped long before they were born. The baker wakes before dawn. The farmer walks toward the fields with predictable steps. The priest moves through familiar paths of words and gestures. Children watch these roles unfold repeatedly, and slowly they understand that their own roles are forming in similar ways. Without announcement, conversation among adults often circles around practical concerns: the condition of crops, the price of grain, the behavior of neighbors. Children listen without being asked to respond. They learn that speaking is less important than listening. Over time, silence becomes a skill rather than an absence. Children also learn the art of waiting. Waiting for bread to bake, waiting for rain to stop, waiting for an adult to finish speaking. Waiting becomes so natural that it hardly feels like waiting. It feels like life itself. Patience is not praised as a virtue. It is simply assumed. As responsibilities increase, children begin to notice that mistakes are remembered longer than successes. A spilled bucket, a lost tool, a forgotten task. These small failures linger in adult memory. Success, by contrast, disappears into expectation. Children learn quickly that smooth functioning is more valuable than exceptional effort. Yet they also learn that competence brings a quiet kind of dignity. When a child completes a task without being reminded, adults notice, even if they do not comment. The child senses this recognition not through words, but through subtle changes in tone and trust. Being useful becomes a form of identity. The physical world continues to shape perception. Children know the feel of soil at different times of year. They recognize the sound of approaching storms. They can tell, by smell alone, whether bread is ready or whether something has gone wrong. This knowledge is not written anywhere. It lives in bodies rather than in books. In moments of rest, children sometimes experience a gentle sense of boredom. Not the restless boredom of modern life, but a slow, quiet emptiness between tasks. In these moments, their minds wander without urgency. They watch dust move in sunlight. They trace patterns in wood grain. They listen to distant sounds without needing to interpret them. Boredom becomes a space where imagination flickers softly, without pressure to perform. Stories remain an important presence, though they are few and often repeated. Tales of saints, kings, battles, and miracles circulate slowly from mouth to mouth. Children hear the same stories many times, until they feel less like narratives and more like familiar landscapes. Details blur, meanings shift slightly. What remains is atmosphere rather than plot. Through these stories, children learn about courage, danger, loyalty, and betrayal, but not in analytical terms. They absorb moods rather than morals. A brave knight feels distant but real. A cruel lord feels possible. A miracle feels improbable yet strangely plausible. These impressions settle quietly in the background of their thoughts. Social boundaries continue to shape behavior. Children notice that some doors are easier to open than others, metaphorically and literally. They learn that certain words should not be spoken in certain places. They learn that some people are greeted with warmth and others with caution. These lessons are not taught as ideology. They are learned as instinct. As children approach the later stages of childhood, they begin to feel a subtle tension between obedience and awareness. They understand expectations clearly, yet they also perceive small inconsistencies in adult behavior. A rule applied strictly to one person may be ignored for another. A promise may be forgotten. These observations do not lead to rebellion. They lead to quiet adaptation. Friendships among children deepen slightly during these years. Shared labor, shared fatigue, shared moments of laughter create bonds that feel stable. Yet even friendship is shaped by necessity. Children know that life may separate them at any time. Apprenticeships, marriages, relocations. Separation is accepted as part of the rhythm of existence. In noble households, children begin to feel the weight of lineage more strongly. They learn that their behavior reflects not only themselves but their ancestors. Expectations become more formalized. Lessons become more precise. The world feels structured by invisible rules that must be followed carefully. In poorer households, structure is less formal but no less binding. Children know that survival depends on cooperation. Their absence would be felt immediately. Their presence is not optional. Responsibility is not symbolic. It is tangible. As evenings approach, the pace of movement slows once again. Children feel the day closing around them. Tasks are completed or postponed. Tools are cleaned. Animals are settled. The village turns inward, gathering around sources of warmth and light. Near the hearth, children listen to voices that drift between conversation and silence. Sometimes adults speak of the past, Sometimes they speak of the future. Often they speak of nothing in particular. Children listen without expecting clarity. They learn that words do not always carry precise meaning. Sometimes they exist simply to fill space. In these quiet hours, children sometimes feel a faint sense of distance from their earlier selves. They remember being smaller, less capable, less aware. The memory feels vague, almost unreal. Childhood does not appear as a distinct stage behind them. It appears as a continuous thread that has simply changed texture. Sleep arrives slowly. Children lie down with bodies tired but minds calm. The world outside continues quietly, but it feels far away. Dreams come without drama. They blend every day. Images with fragments of stories and distant impressions. Night settles gently over the village once more. Not as a dramatic curtain falling, but as a familiar presence returning to its place. The sky darkens in layers rather than in sudden shifts. The last light lingers on rooftops and fields, then slowly withdraws. Children feel this transition not with urgency, but with recognition. Evening has its own quiet weight, and they have learned how to carry it. By this point in their growing years, children are no longer surprised by the shape of life. Surprise belongs to earlier seasons of childhood. Now, awareness has replaced it. They know that tomorrow will resemble today. They know that the world will not suddenly transform itself. This knowledge does not feel heavy. It feels stable, like ground beneath their feet. In the hush of late evening, the village seems smaller than it did during the day. Sounds travel farther in the still air. A distant voice, a closing door, a soft step on gravel. Children listen without needing to interpret. Listening itself has become a habit, almost a form of comfort. Inside homes, the fire glows steadily. Shadows move slowly across walls. Adults speak in lower tones, sometimes about practical matters, sometimes about memories, sometimes about nothing. That requires attention. Children sit or lie nearby, half involved, half distant. They are present without being central. They have learned that presence does not always require participation as children approach the threshold between childhood and youth. They begin to sense subtle changes in how they perceive the world. Tasks that once felt heavy now feel manageable. Instructions that once felt confusing now feel obvious. The world has not changed, but their relationship to it has shifted quietly. They begin to notice that their thoughts linger longer on certain questions. Why some families struggle more than others. Why certain people command respect while others do not. Why some paths lead outward while most lead back home. These questions do not form clearly. They hover at the edges of awareness, then dissolve into routine. Adults rarely engage with such questions directly. When children ask, answers are brief, practical, sometimes evasive. Life is explained in terms of necessity rather than meaning. Children learn that not all questions are meant to be answered. Some are simply endured. The way to tradition becomes more apparent during these years. Children see how little changes from one generation to the next. Tools resemble those used by grandparents. Songs echo older melodies. Customs repeat themselves with minimal variation. The past is not something studied. It is something inhabited. In this environment, personal. Choice feels limited, but not consciously oppressive. Children do not constantly dream of alternatives. They dream within the boundaries of what they know: a better harvest, a kinder Lord, a slightly easier winter. Their imagination moves within familiar shapes, not beyond them, yet within these boundaries, emotional life deepens quietly. Children experience pride when a task is completed well. They experience disappointment when effort goes unnoticed. They feel closeness to siblings, irritation with peers, admiration for certain adults. These emotions are not discussed openly. They are carried silently, like small objects hidden in pockets. Occasionally, a child experiences a moment of intense stillness. They stand alone for a brief moment, watching the world continue without them. The feeling is not loneliness exactly. It is a sense of being separate, of observing rather than participating. The moment passes quickly, replaced by the next demand, the next sound, the next task. But something faint remains, like an echo dot, as responsibilities continue to accumulate. Children begin to realize that their lives are becoming less flexible. Time once spent wandering or playing is now filled with obligations. The shift is gradual, almost invisible. There is no clear day when childhood ends. Instead, childhood thins out slowly, like mist rising from a field. Despite this narrowing, the world does not feel hostile. It feels predictable. Predictability becomes a form of safety. Even hardship feels less frightening when it follows known patterns. Children learn to endure not through courage, but through familiarity. In the quiet hours before sleep, children sometimes revisit memories of earlier years. They remember running freely across fields, listening to stories without understanding, them feeling small without responsibility. These memories feel distant but not painful. They are simply part of a longer story. The present feels heavier, but also more stable. Children understand more, but expect less. They have learned that life rarely offers sudden rewards. It offers continuity instead. Outside, the night continues its slow movement. Stars appear one by one, faint and distant. Children do not analyze them. They accept them as part of the sky's quiet order. The universe feels large, but not threatening. It feels indifferent in a calm way. As sleep approaches, bodies relax gradually. Muscles release tension accumulated during the day. Thoughts become less structured. Images drift through the mind without clear sequence. The sound of breathing fills the room, steady and unhurried. Tomorrow will come again. It will bring familiar work, familiar voices, familiar expectations. Children will wake. Not with excitement, not with dread, but with acceptance. They will move into their roles with practiced ease,